You are now listening to the Astral Hour. I'm your host, AstralMeadow. Join me as we take a glimpse into the mysterious. One of the big guys that I really love to study and talk about, who was very much into both sides of viewing this, would be Ficino. Ficino lived from 1433 to 1499. He was an Italian scholar and a Catholic priest. He was one of the most influential humanist philosophers of the early Renaissance. He was also an astrologer, reviver of Neoplatonism, and the first to translate Plato's work into Latin. Ficino is such an interesting character to me because he's literally a priest. He's like ingrained into the church, but he's like obsessed with magic. He's like really into astrology. He really wants to study this ancient wisdom because he actually believed that it was sort of the origin of Christianity. You know, that these, they're called Serapis priests. We can get into the whole cult of Serapis. Had actually predicted the birth of Jesus. And you think about like the Magi. I mean, those are magicians, right? And
Yeah,
so
that gets overlooked a
he
lot.
was starting to see like that there was this interconnection with some of this wisdom that was coming out of Egypt that actually correlated with some of the Christian texts. So he actually tried to sort of like merge the two together. And, I think it worked for him. I think he was able to make enough connections to make it work. Let's talk for a minute about the cult of Serapis. So, the cult of Serapis is something that comes out of Egypt. It is based around the death of Osiris. It's a wisdom cult, and it's very similar to the Jesus, because when we look at this Osiris myth, is he was killed by his brother, and then Thoth works with Isis to help revive him and bring him back. That's very much like Jesus, being resurrected. Okay, so there's like already a similarity right there. So this allowed Ficino to sort of look at, okay, Christianity was just a slightly modified continuation of this Serapis cult. He believed that John the Baptist and Jesus were priests of this cult. And it's very interesting that John the Baptist was Florence's patron saint, which is the city that he was based around in.
And this is Ficino that believed that John the
Right,
Baptist
and I wanted
Jesus
to
were...
read this.
That's interesting.
Okay, so here's a little section that I just found so interesting. This is an article written by Philip Copens. It's titled The Corpus Hermeticum, which is one of the books that Ficino translated into Latin. Okay, he was responsible for that. Anyways, in this article, it talks about the Serapis cult. So it should be noted that they had nothing against Jesus, who they after all considered to have been a Serapis priest. Their problem was with what had become of his church and its dogma, which was not in line with Jesus or the Serapis teaching. Rather than a wisdom cult, Christianity was a dogmatic cult. So I think they noticed this. I think that they were devout, but I think they started noticing it as they were spending all this time studying it, having a deep relationship with their creator. They were like, okay, the dogma is not lining up.
Would this have been in the Renaissance?
Yes. So rather than attack, they redefined. They started working from within. All right. And so he was called out a couple times for like, okay, heresy, but he was always able to dial it back to, I'm just studying the people that predicted the birth of Jesus. I just want to know. But I think deep down he had a thirst for knowledge. I think he could see that there was something deeper going on here and that he wanted to know more about it. And he utilized the technical aspect, okay, of the Hermetica. There's a book called The Picatrix, and this is full of technical information on how to make talismans based on certain planetary alignments and all this. I have a copy of it. It's extremely challenging to read. And if you are not well versed in alchemy and astrology, you're probably not going to be able to understand it, which is a big part of this kind of information because it's almost like intentionally veiled.
Yeah.
And if you're not an initiate, you're not going to, it's going to sound like gibberish.
Right.
Right. So he worked with this with many artists, the most notable being Sandro Botticelli. He used this Hermetic application when painting the Minerva and the Centaur, the Birth of Venus, and the Primavera. So this is a practical application of magic, making a complex talisman into these paintings. And they were arranged in a way to transmit healthy, rejuvenating, anti-Saturn qualities.
Wow.
Okay. Ficino's very has a weird relationship with Saturn, and he, in his chart, he was dominated by Saturn, and I think that around this time we viewed Saturn through a very dark lens. I get it. He's a very serious planet. Sometimes his lessons are harsh, and so, you know, I'm working hard myself to find beauty with Saturn. So I understand like the people that are just like trembling in those properties. So, you know, all the paint and like the timing of the painting and the concept, he was working with these artists to bring down this planetary energy and store it within these paintings. And then everyone that's looking at these paintings is going to be inspired, right? It's going to speak to them in a way, you know, that reading like the philosophical aspect might not. So you can feel so much through painting that you can't through, you know, studying it.
It's so interesting that there were so many people during the Renaissance that were trying to infuse so much knowledge and hidden information into their paintings, and like they were trying to elicit these big universal feelings and downloads, and you know, you've got Da Vinci and all of these other people that are very clearly painting with this information in their minds.
Right. And there's all sorts of hidden meaning. Definitely with Da Vinci, we could study that for, you know, months and still not fully understand it. But if you study some of these Hermetic principles, if you start studying just Hermeticism in general, it actually opens your mind up to being able to make some sense of why, you know, why did he paint it this way? And like, why were there 12? And why, you know, like, is there the grail on the table? You know, there's all these things that you might not notice.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. It's, while I was listening to you kind of talk about Ficino, it dawned on me that we are so blessed, and we have to be so grateful to these small handful of men throughout history that have done this work to pass this knowledge on through to us. Because you just get a couple here or there every couple centuries or something that put in this work, and they probably go up against strict, authority trying to tell them not to, and all of this. And it's not like you've got hundreds or thousands of people doing this. You literally just have one or two every couple of centuries or every couple of years or something. And then you have someone else a couple years later that'll translate that.
Right.
And then 100 years later, someone else.
And
literally, we could count on a hand the number of people that have helped pass this information from ancient Egypt to us now. And we have to be so grateful for those people doing that. It's so wild.
They risked their lives to get us this information.